Hello, I am Engineer Mogoro Wairimu, an active mobility associate at ITDP based in Nairobi, and I'll be covering traffic and speed management measures to improve road safety. This is an illustration of how most of our streets in our urban areas are, and this example is in Nairobi. So we do have space for vehicular movement. It's well illustrated. We have adequate space for parking. As you can see, we have angular and perpendicular parking along the sides of this street. We have no spaces allocated for walking, so pedestrians are walking at the edge of the carriageway on both sides. We have no space allocated for cycling. In fact, no cyclist is visible in this photo. We have no spaces allocated for organized street vending, and we have no spaces allocated to meet and interact with friends. So this is how most of our urban streets are designed and constructed, mostly like highway, which just allow vehicular movement and parking for vehicles. Again, this is the current situation where we prioritize motorized transport on urban streets. This is an example of kids crossing a road in Kisumu. There's no crossing, we don't have any visible walkways. So this is not safe for them, and this is not safe for any pedestrians, especially pedestrians at such a young age. Again, this is the current situation, ineffective NMT infrastructure. There is the tendency of constructing NMT infrastructure just to tick the box that it is done. But when you look and you interrogate the usability of NMT infrastructure, it becomes very difficult. For instance, this is a street in Nakuru. We have a walkway, we have a cycle track, and we have the carriageway. As shown, the pedestrian on the walkway has to jump across the the drain gap that has been left. And this is not an ideal way of providing a drainage because it makes that footpath discontinuous. And it's even, so that means that that footpath cannot be used by someone who is living with disability or a young child who may not manage to jump across the hurdle. As shown in the photo, you can see cyclists are using the carriageway because whereas we have a wide cycle track provided, they are not able to move across that barrier on the cycle track, not unless then they have to alight from their bicycle. So it becomes easier for them to cycle on the carriageway as opposed to cycling on the provided cycle track. And that's what we call ineffective NMT infrastructure. Where on the ground we have NMT infrastructure, but it is not able, cyclists and pedestrians are not able to utilize it well because the NMT infrastructure has not been constructed in a way that makes it easy to be utilized. Again, another current situation where we provide footbridges, and what footbridges do, then they encourage more pedestrians to cross in a grade separated situation, and that means that vehicles below them can move free, can have free flow without any interruption. They don't have to slow down to allow for pedestrians to cross the road. But as shown in this photo, whereas we have a footbridge provided, we still have pedestrians crossing at grade. Those footbridges are uncomfortable. They increase the travel distance for pedestrians. Some of them are inaccessible. They really hinder universal access. They are difficult to use. They are not very easy, and so the pedestrians will end up using the easiest way, which is what is shown. They will cross at the road level, yet there is a footbridge provided, which really risks their lives because when footbridges are provided, then we notice that most drivers don't put a lot of effort to yield to allow pedestrians to cross. Another current situation well displayed. This is a road in Nairobi. In Kenya, we have the provision of a road maintenance fund that in our country, and that maintenance fund is supposed to be used to maintain infrastructure in our country. So when you look at this road, we have the footpath, which is not at its best state. It's like in medium condition. We have a cycle track that is totally dilapidated, and we have a carriageway that is well maintained. So one of the things that we do but we don't do is that we do not maintain NMT infrastructure, which leads to the NMT infrastructure getting worn out very fast, forcing NMT users to share the road with cyclists even when infrastructure has been provided, as well illustrated in this slide. Another current situation is where we provide cycle tracks and footpaths that are not well separated between motorized traffic. So we have four cyclists captured in this photo, but we can notice on the cycle track, which is just indicated by road marking, we have a motorcycle that is using the cycle track. So when we do not adequately separate motorized traffic and NMT, we find that situation where motorized traffic users do not respect and they encroach on NMT facilities, making it very unsafe for NMT users. Fatalities from road crashes. This is an example of 1st January to September, comparing the year 2020 and 2021. And what we can see from this is that majority of the fatalities, both in 2020 and 2021, happen to be pedestrians. And this is what happens in most of our urban areas. Because we barely provide for pedestrians, we barely provide for cyclists. That means NMT users take the low priority on our roads. They end up being the highest casualties from road crashes. Designing for safety means that vehicles need to be encouraged to move at slower speeds. For instance, this is a good illustration of what happens when we have vehicular impact between a vehicle and a pedestrian. If the vehicle was moving at slower speeds as illustrated on the left side of the graph, pedestrians only incur small injuries. But as the speed of the vehicle increases, as illustrated on the right side of the graph, it gets to a point where it is even fatal for the pedestrian. So when we are encouraging safety, the first thing we need to encourage is vehicles moving at slower speeds, especially in urban areas, because of that multimodular conflict. We have other modes, we have pedestrians, we have cyclists, and now when we have that kind of when we have multiple modes using the same road corridors, vehicles need to move at slower speeds to ensure that all the other modes are well protected and they are safe when using those streets. In speed management, how are we supposed to move? As I said earlier, we need to ensure that the more we have interactions between different modes of transport, the slower the vehicles need to move. And this slide perfectly illustrates that. The first example is a shared street. A shared street is utilized by motorized traffic, pedestrians, and cyclists, and even we have vending at times happening on the same street. So when we have that kind of a shared street, vehicles are supposed to move at 15 kilometers per hour, and that slow speed should allow them to react on time should there be any conflict between either of those modes or between both of similar modes. Then they are able to react on time, they are able to brake and stop, and then that increases the chances that road crashes will be prevented in a shared lane if vehicles move slowly. When we have the provision of a footpath, what happens is that pedestrians then use the footpath and cyclists share the carriageway with motorized traffic. To ensure safety of the cyclists who are sharing the carriageway with motorists, then motorists need to restrict themselves to a speed of 30 kilometers per hour. That way then, we are able to ensure that even if they are moving a bit faster, the cyclists who are also sharing the same lane are well protected and they are able to move comfortably. At speeds of 50 kilometers per hour, then we need to provide separate lanes for vehicles, for cyclists, and for pedestrians, as well as illustrated. So this is how we need to move at these speeds to ensure that all modes are well protected in urban areas. So quality NMT facility. One of the things that we have talked about is the fact that we have more accidents because our current urban areas do not cater adequately for NMT users. So how do we then come up with quality NMT facilities and encourage road safety? One, This is the recommended footpath design, ensuring that we have a frontage zone, and this frontage zone is usually the buffer between the activities happening on the side of the road and where the pedestrian is moving. We have the pedestrian zone that offers a continuous clear space for pedestrians to move. It should be adequate there. It should have adequate clear width, and it should have no obstructions for free flow of pedestrians. Then we have the furniture zone, which contains trees, street lights, billboards, utility boxes, and other potential obstructions that could be found that are on the footpath. This is a high quality footpath in Nairobi. As said, it has all the zones and it has adequate clear width of the pedestrian zone where for pedestrians to move. And as you can see, we have a person living with disability being able to move on this footpath without being assisted. So again, adequate separation of NMT and MT users, and we have the tendency of vehicles parking on footpaths and cycle tracks. So the recommendation is to have bollards to ensure that vehicles keep off footpaths, and then that way then you're not going to have motorized traffic encroaching on footpaths. Another recommendation is universal access of footpaths. As shown earlier, when footpaths are constructed in a way that they incorporate universal access, we can have persons living with disability being able to move on the same footpath without being aided. Another recommendation is the provision of safe and accessible level crossings. As indicated earlier, even when we provide footbridges, we have most pedestrians still opting to cross on the road level. Well, that is not safe for them. And because the desire line of the pedestrians is to cross at the road level, then we need to provide safe and accessible level crossings which are universally accessible. That means they can be used by both people living with disability, people who are elderly, children, and the vulnerable road users very easily and very comfortably. And then that way we could reduce the instances where a lot of collisions happen at footbridges. And that has been noticed in Kenya. We have Outer Ring Road being one of the roads where we have so many collisions happening at footbridges because pedestrians are not able to use the footbridges, and when they cross at the road level, they end up colliding with fast moving vehicles and end up dying from such road crashes. This is a good example of a safe level crossing in Dar es Salaam. This is another example of a safe level crossing in Kisumu. Another recommendation is providing high quality cycle tracks, and this ensures that we are able to have more cyclists moving in our urban roads but being safe. So how do we do that? Ensuring that they are well physically separated from mixed traffic, ensuring that we provide an adequate clear width of the cycle track and smooth cycling material so that cyclists are able to use the cycle track easily, and also ensuring we have a footpath to cater to pedestrians to reduce the conflict between pedestrians and cyclists. This is a good example of a cycle track in Nairobi, Ngong Road. This is another good example of a cycle track, a comfortable cycle track that has been provided. And as we can see, we have pedestrian we have a pedestrian, and we also have a person living with disability who is able to move without assistance. Another thing that we need to note is that we need to ensure that both the cycle track and the footpath are at the same level, because we have instances where we will find pedestrians using the cycle track like as shown in this photo, and we need to ensure that they are all at the same level such that then should there be any obstruction, like we have a pedestrian using the cycle track, a cycle track can manage to move to the footpath or get past the pedestrian and also get back to the cycle track without any issue. So this barrier that is constructed between cycle tracks and footpaths needs to be stopped so that then we are able to construct high quality NMT infrastructure. Another recommendation is having pedestrianized corridors. In most urban areas, we can have corridors where the access is only for pedestrians and cyclists. This is a very good example in Rwanda. As you can see, the area where the pedestrians are walking, the footpath is at the same level with the cycle track, and this corridor then keeps away motorized traffic, and they're very safe for NMT users. We also need to construct streets as public spaces, provide furniture for people so that they are able to sit and to rest. So this is what quality NMT infrastructure looks like. And also we are supposed to have corridors that prioritize public transport in NMT. This is a corridor, Morogoro Road in Dar es Salaam, where we only have the BRT and adequate NMT infrastructure. And this is what it looks like. Again, one other aspect to ensure road safety is to ensure we have multimodal intersections. These are intersections that incorporate all modes safely. One way we do that is by providing safe crossings that follow pedestrian desire lines. Do not provide footbridges as in urban areas. Do not provide footbridges in urban areas because, as shown earlier, even when they are provided, they are not utilized. Instead, provide safe level crossings at the pedestrian desire lines. Another way to ensure safe multimodal intersections is by ensuring that we bulb out as we get to intersections. This is a good example that shows bulbed out intersections. And what bulbing out does is that, one, it reduces the speed of vehicles. So vehicles at bulbed out intersections move at slower speeds when opposed to intersections that are not bulbed out. And it also reduces the distance covered by pedestrians who are crossing the road, as illustrated in this. So we need to ensure we have safe intersections that cater to all modes. Again, recommendation, we need to have safe intersections. This is an example of an unsafe intersection. And an unsafe intersection because this vehicle is able to move very fast at the junction area. So how do we make these intersections safe? By doing this. One, you bulb it out as illustrated, which leads to slower vehicle speeds as they traverse the intersection, and also it helps in a shorter crossing distance for the pedestrians, cyclists, and especially vulnerable road users. So this is how we are supposed to ensure we move at intersections. Ensure that vehicles are able to yield as much as possible and move at the slowest speeds, and that also the pedestrians, NMT users, and other vulnerable users cover such a short distance when they are crossing at intersections. So this is another recommendation, a protected intersection. And how do you do that? You are able to see that any cyclist is able to move comfortably to the other side without any issue, and you can see that the radius of the vehicle is reduced. So this is how we ensure that we design intersections, ensure that it is protected and that cyclists and pedestrians are able to cross intersections safely, and that vehicles are able to move at intersections at very slow speeds. That way then we are able to ensure safety for all road users on intersections, especially in urban areas. This is protected roundabout design. So this is a roundabout design that has been constructed in a way that it protects all users. As you can see, we have BRT, we have mixed traffic, we have cyclists and pedestrians on this roundabout. So how then this is how you're supposed to construct a roundabout in a way that it caters to all users who are using that roundabout, especially in urban areas. As you can see, it has a refuge island, it has crossings for pedestrians, it has continuous movements provided for cycle traffic, and also it has priority movement for BRT. So as indicated earlier, most of our intersections do not cater for movements of other modes other than motor vehicles. you realize that pedestrians, for footpaths which are used by pedestrians and for cycle tracks used by cyclists, they are usually discontinuous on intersections. So we need to ensure that our intersections still provide continuous infrastructure for pedestrians and for cyclists as shown below. And this way then we are able to have all the modes utilizing the intersection or utilizing the roundabout safely. So as shown, a cyclist can move very comfortably from one side to the other side without having an issue because the cyclist infrastructure is well provided throughout. In instances where we have very wide turning radius on junctions, what we can do is that we can make some interventions. Ideally, they're usually temporary, but then they can be promoted to permanent interventions to reduce those turning radius. Like this is in Ethiopia, where they had some interventions that then improved that intersection, and such interventions are the ones that are implemented as now permanent intervention, making that intersection very safe. So tactile urbanism is one of the ways in which we can use to handle intersections that we feel are safe. We can make some temporary interventions, and these temporary interventions are later then converted as permanent interventions when then we have already tried and tested and that notice that the intersection now is much safer when compared to what it was before tactical urbanism was done. Thank you very much.